your host, Amber Akilla. This is my podcast where I talk about stuff and things, cute, chaotic, and critical thinking. I'm a DJ / creative consultant. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at Amber Akilla, on Spotify and SoundCloud at Amber Akilla for music and mixes. I hope everyone's doing well. Today is a bonus episode on West Elm Caleb and the whole TikTok fiasco. I'm kind of assuming that people know what went down, but let me give you like an abbreviated version. Basically, there's a creator on TikTok. She made a video about how she dated this guy. She went on a first date with a guy. Her kind of like personal brand online is around the concept of like men are fans. So obviously she has this like cynical position towards men to start off with, but then she happened to go on this really amazing date. She thought it was amazing, thought the guy was really great, etc., etc. Then another creator made a video saying, hey, I want to warn, the girls in New York, because she went on this date or matched with a guy known as West Elm Caleb, and he has this reputation for dating and ghosting girls and kind of like creating a false impression of what his intentions are. I guess some people might have used the term like gaslighting and love bombing. He also sent like unsolicited dick pics and nudes and stuff. So just general fuckboy behavior, basically. And then these videos went viral. Everyone started talking about West Elm Caleb. Girls coming out saying, they realized they dated him too. One girl saying that she had woken up in Caleb's bed on a Saturday morning, and then this other girl that had spoken about her date with him on Saturday night. So he's just, a localized New York virus, but I think everybody knows somebody that's kind of like West Elm Caleb or has known of someone like that. And I don't want to make any like value or like moral judgments on anyone involved. I don't know anybody personally, but I think like the discussions around it have been really interesting, and I'm just going to share my thoughts about it because why the hell not? And just kind of like what I take away from the whole situation. So I feel like it's just really interesting to see women being able to communicate this way about egregious male behavior. I mean, I think it's fucked up the way that we kind of normalize and excuse to some degree the way that men like this guy behave. It's considered standard practice to get ghosted from dates, or like especially through dating apps, to receive unsolicited dick pics and nudes from guys, to be quote unquote love bombed and gaslit or whatever. And I think there's a lot of discussion around whether these terms that are used in the context of psychological abuse are kind of having their meaning watered down in the context of the West Elm Caleb thing. And then also a lot of discussion around how, he's getting cancelled and people trying to dox him, which is like when they want to reveal someone's address online, and like how his job might be at stake, all this kind of stuff. I personally didn't see any content that was like trying to dox him. I did see someone post a picture of his Bumble profile or something, so you could like put a face to the name. Again, there's no like last name that I saw, just as like a passive kind of consumer of surrounding content. And I do think that there would be people that took it over the line and may have wanted to do those things. I'm just like clarifying that I didn't see any of that personally, and I'm not like so invested in the whole saga that I feel a need to get that involved. Also because I don't live in New York and I'm not on dating apps. So I don't really care. But I think it's interesting, like I said, the discussion around it. There was another woman on TikTok who in her bio says she's a writer for the New York Times, and she was kind of like coming to his defense, saying like, people are blowing this out of proportion, it's not fair. She's a West Elm Caleb apologizer. And I just think that's very telling because From my perspective, I see women getting cancelled for a lot less online. You know, like women get cancelled for their opinions, for things that they say, and like there's no proof or evidence of their actions. Whereas in this case, this was a guy who had actually dated around a lot. A lot of women had evidence for it. I think also it's possible that there are people who never had contact with him and might have jumped on the bandwagon to just make jokes around it and, you know, satirically joke about having dated him and making a meme about it. And I think in general that just speaks to the way that we need to take everything we see on social media with a grain of salt without getting like personally invested in other people's business. You know, you can kind of enjoy it at surface level for entertainment without needing it to like define your reality or your worldview. So yeah, I think it just speaks to internet culture in general as much as it does like the sort of dating norms and behaviors that people are participating in these days. I did like a quick sort of superficial Google on West Elm Caleb, and so many publications have picked up stories about him, like Pedestrian, Junkie, HuffPost, New York Post, GQ, Rolling Stone, Vice, Wired, BuzzFeed, Slate, Washington Post, USA Today. Like everybody's writing about it. And I don't understand like this social media to mainstream media crossover that's happening. It's so weird. And for people to, it's interesting that like, especially someone like that New York Times writer saying like, oh, the way that people talk about this and it could possibly ruin somebody's life. And I'm like, you're very much part of that machine that fuels the way that very niche news becomes mainstream news. And I just think it's funny how it takes a guy being treated the way that women are treated for people to be like, no, this is fucked up. We need to do something about the way that online culture treats people. It's like, why is it when it's a straight white guy who's being mistreated online that suddenly this is a serious issue? Women are getting harassed every day on the internet and no one does anything about that. And I have so many examples just from people that I know receiving unsolicited dick pics, getting rape threats, death threats through their Instagram for doing things that are arguably something to celebrate. Like I had friends that performed on like national TV and she said that the number of death threats and rape threats she got after it was like disturbing. Of course, she received a lot of positive feedback too, but it's like, why does it have to come with a death threat? She's like performing on TV. She's not serially dating and ghosting dudes. It just blows my mind, you know, like women who are just posting hot fit pics on their Instagram. You know, they're not harming anybody by doing that in a direct way, and also receiving unsolicited dick pics from randoms. I consider myself generally pretty lucky, touch wood, that I haven't received too many explicit images into my Instagram DMs. I think it's because I have a very specific kind of online persona that kind of naturally filters out that kind of bullshit. Although I will say on TikTok, sometimes my videos do get sent to a very weird place and I get very specific types of comments, or my videos get picked up by like incel forums and stuff. But for me, in that context, I'm like, you don't really know me, so I don't really care, but it's just funny to watch and also disturbing to see that these are the thoughts that people have and they feel confident to express that on an online forum with other people. But I digress. I saw a lot of people on Twitter sort of taking the opportunity to accuse Gen Z of being too sensitive when it comes to dating, like ghosting is normal, someone being nice to you is normal, it's not love bombing, and, you know, not everything has to be pathologized, etc., etc. And to a degree, I agree, but I feel that in this case, because the pattern of his behavior was so clear and he was still subjectively like leaving a lot of women heartbroken. And it's not the fact that he ghosted them, it's like the fact that he probably made a lot of promises about how special the girl was, his plans for them, making it seem like it was exclusive while simultaneously dating like 5 other people at the same time. You know, you can be transparent about what you're doing. It's when people present things as one way but are doing the opposite that creates an issue, right? Like, integrity is so important when it comes to dating, and when you lack integrity, I don't think you should be serially dating, in my personal opinion. But it's a free country in America. And I think that, why can't women expect to be treated with respect in dating? It shouldn't be okay that we normalize those sorts of behaviors. And I fucking hate the word normalize as well. But I do think that ghosting is okay at the very early stages of dating, when you don't know somebody that well, just letting the communication sort of die off. But I'm talking like early stages, before you've necessarily gotten physically intimate. I think once you've gotten physically intimate, once you've spent time together, you're entitled, if anything, to a conversation just to end things and then move on with your life. I think it's extremely disrespectful to get physically intimate with somebody under the premise of commitment and then ghost. In my opinion, that's sus behavior, and nobody should tolerate that. And I think people are allowed to say that that's unpleasant. Just because it's common doesn't mean it should continue, doesn't mean that it should be encouraged. So that's my take on that. I've been thinking a lot about dating app culture in general over the last 6 months or whatever that I've been more active on TikTok, and just the way that people date, the pacing that people date with. And I feel like online dating can kind of, just warp our expectations when it comes to online dating, and the pace at which it takes a connection to develop. And I'm not on dating apps, disclaimer, so I can't speak from first-hand experience, but just from what I observe, and also my experience with making friends online even, it's this illusion of closeness that you have with somebody because you follow each other online doesn't necessarily translate into your in-person relationship. And when you're dating especially, you need to be able to create that in-person relationship. For online friendships, it can just stay superficial and you can enjoy being on internet friends, but obviously a romantic relationship is different. And I feel like for me, because I'm not on dating apps, and even though I'm not really actively dating, seeking out dates, I think about, the pace at which guys do ask me out. It's over the course of months, I might meet them, or we might have followed each other, and then maybe we go out for coffee or we meet up. So it happens over a period of time. And I think that's okay. Sometimes you do feel oh, why is it taking so long? Or does he like me? Doesn't he like me? That's also part of the journey and the fun of it too, that kind of tension that starts to build, and the curiosity around each other until you actually get to hang out. And I find that that's a much healthier pace to go out, because when I have been in situations where things have been a flurry of emotions and everything's happened so quickly, it just dies, the flame that burns twice as bright, burns out, whatever, twice as fast, whatever. Burns for half as long, whatever the saying is. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that there is a middle ground that you can kind of reach. And I'm not saying that dating apps are bad. I think I just did a TikTok the other day asking people for their to share their positive experiences, if they've had any deep, sacred connections that are formed from dating apps. And people did leave stories about meeting their partner, about their best friend meeting their partner and they're getting married, and being able to have all different sorts of deep connections with people that didn't necessarily last a long time but still had meaning, meeting friends. So I think they do still serve a purpose. But I also think that there's a lot of people that are on dating apps feeling burnt out, not really satisfied with the outcomes that they're getting, and not necessarily looking for other ways to build connection with people, or to just take time off them and do some self-discovery before jumping back into dating. So I think that something that could have happened in terms of girls that had gotten involved with a guy like West Elm Caleb is that because he came on so strong and there is this sense of familiarity with him, and just the way that this like instant connection can happen on dating apps. I don't even mean like between two people. I just mean like the very nature of like swiping and then it's a match. And then you just assume that you sort of know each other, or you can make this assumption that you know each other and that you're into each other before even meeting each other. You know what I mean? Obviously that can happen as well off dating apps, but I just think that the fact that it's happened on a dating app makes it so clear. And maybe it's my own naivety that and my lack of external self-awareness. I'm kind of like, I still don't really know whether a guy really likes me or not until he's come out and said it to me. And it might take 1 or 2 meetings for us to get there, or I don't know, like things need to happen to me in person with someone for me to be able to feel like actually connected to them beyond just like a superficial online connection. And I think that you kind of are at risk of circumventing that when you are on dating apps. And that doesn't necessarily happen to everybody, but it's just like something to be mindful of if you're on them. And then to also remember that when you have that feeling, you can kind of take a step back and remember to just pace yourself until you've met that person. And especially when people are young, I think it's easy to get caught up in all that. And yeah, especially for the creator whose personal brand is like men are fans, I think when you position yourself publicly in a way that's like cynical of men, it creates a void within you that like any guy that extends kindness to you can like immediately, it feels like drugs almost, you know. Even though I'm like critical of male behavior and the patriarchy and stuff online, I am still intentional with my connections with dudes that I have like in person, and I try not to get too cynical in terms of dating in general. I mean, I find dating culture very strange, but it doesn't mean I don't believe in love, you know. And I think that sometimes you can go too far and get cynical about not just dating but love and connection in general, and then it kind of sets you up in this like deficit position without even realizing. So when someone comes along and is doing love bombing in air quotes things, it can feel overwhelming and like so much more exciting and deep than it would be if you were just kind of like in a neutral place and coming with a more curious sort of perspective, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that we all go through, you know, like just as women in general, it can be very easy to get disheartened from the way that you get treated by men just on a daily basis in society, and then also in dating as well. So that's why I do think that taking time off, whether you're a woman or not, from dating, focusing on yourself, doing a little bit of self-discovery and reflection before getting back out into the dating market is important. At least from my personal experience, it's been very helpful, especially for me, because I'm like in my late 20s and a lot of people around me are getting married and having babies, which I think is great for them if that's what they really want. But it's like not what I want at the moment, not a priority at all. And I honestly don't feel bad about it at all. I think a lot of women my age do struggle with this pressure that I think is that like internalized from family or society to get married and have children before they're 30. And I just don't feel it. I don't care. It's not that I don't want to have babies. It's not that I don't want to get married. It's just like not a priority for me. And I feel like I have faith that the right things will happen at the right time. I don't need to worry so much about it. I'm more interested in having fun as me than I am having a baby. And I mean, no shade to people who have babies. I admire it a lot, but it doesn't look easy. So why would I make my life harder when I'm not like passionate about the reason to make it more difficult? You know what I mean? Like I want having children to be something that I embrace with my whole chest, not something that I just do because it seems like everyone else is doing it, because it's a huge responsibility to raise children and have children. I just don't even know how people do it to begin with. It baffles me. Like I was an accident, and my mum tells me how unprepared she was to have a child. She just had to make it work, and that's what everybody says. Yeah, you just have to make it work. And I'm like, I don't want to just make it work. That sounds so stressful. I can barely keep myself alive half the time. Anyway, Okay, so on top of like thinking about dating culture in general, also just thinking about the dynamics between men and women in dating and like gender roles and patriarchy, feminism, how all these different ideas kind of like clash, misogyny, etc. And just what women can do in general to self-empower, whether it's in their life in general or in dating. And I think from what I've observed over the past few months being online and more active talking about these sorts of things, because what interests me the most is how people of any gender can self-empower. That's just something that's always been a topic of interest to me. I think because of the way that I grew up, I did not feel empowered at all. I was extremely shy, introverted, timid. I got bullied, and I didn't have a strong sense of self growing up. But it was so important for me to get to a place where I could feel centered and confident in who I was. And so that's been like my life's journey up until this point. So for me, it's like, how can I communicate that process to anybody else that might be going through the same thing that I was going through 5 or 6 years ago? And obviously for me, it's more relevant as a woman to be speaking about that in the context of women and through potentially the lens of feminism. And I've done work in that space as well, doing female and LGBTQ centered projects. The things that I learned from doing those projects, the challenges that you come across, and basically what I've realized is that the best way to communicate about self-empowerment is actually through dating dynamics, I find. I don't really care about dating in general, but I observe the culture and I talk about it a lot with my friends and I see a lot of content about it online. And at the end of the day, I think that if you can feel empowered in your intimate relationships, whether it's your close friendships or your close romantic relationships, your relationships with your family, then that can naturally filter out into your business relationships, into your, other outer world sort of dynamics. But when you're too focused on just like girl bossing at work and how you can get equal pay and all those things, like that doesn't necessarily translate into your intimate relationships, because it doesn't mirror the most vulnerable parts of you necessarily, in the same way that it can in romantic relationships. Like sometimes when you've been single for too long, it can be like overwhelming to get into an intimate relationship, and then parts of you that you kind of forgotten that were there, shadowy parts of you, become like reactivated just from that level of closeness and the mirroring that can happen in an intimate relationship. So yeah, it's been interesting to see that. Basically, the bottom line is for women in general to just have standards and stick by them. Standards and boundaries. You need to have standards and boundaries, and you need to honor them yourself without expecting a man to do that. Because the reason why men continue the kind of behavior that someone like West Elm Caleb gets away with is because they get away with it, because women don't have those standards and boundaries yet. And that's okay. You're not a bad person because you don't have them. It's just a journey to get there, because obviously up until this point, society has encouraged women to have no boundaries, to have no standards, and to think that men are the prize, and to encourage us to mold and shapeshift in order to get the guy. But times have changed, I believe, and more discussion is being had about how, a romantic relationship should be a partnership. It should be two people being on the same team. It should be two people connecting and building together and seeing each other as equals, not a game of manipulation, not men seeing women as objects or possessions to be owned and conquered. So I think like there is still, this push-pull that happens between men and women in dating. And to me, like that's fun and it's part of it. I don't want to be the man in a relationship. I still want to be treated like a girl, but as an equal, I still think it's important to be pursued, because whether it's scientific or not, I do think that men appreciate things that they earn. And if you're chasing a guy, he's not going to tell you that it's a turn off, but it probably is. He's going to tell everybody else that it is. Just my opinion. Yeah, the dance of dating I think is fun. It doesn't have to be a game in terms of winners and losers. It can be a dance, your partners creating art together. But, okay, so this Twitter thread that I read by a straight guy, and controversial, I think this perspective is kind of controversial, and maybe the way that he worded it was a little too blunt for some people, but I honestly think there's truth in it. And it's a hard pill to swallow, I think, when we have this kind of history, recent history, where women are being outspoken about the oppression of women and how women are not treated as equals, and all these additional pressures that are placed on women, and why is it so hard to just be treated like a person. So then you kind of like subconsciously fall into this victim-y mindset, victim narrative. But at the same time, it's like, well, if we're the ones that want things to change, we have to change how we behave and what we allow. That's the only way to compel men to change. Otherwise, what is the reason? It doesn't matter what lens I look at it through, whether it's through feminist lens, self-esteem lens, self-empowerment lens, spirituality lens, psychological lens. And it doesn't just apply for women either. It applies to all genders. It's like, if you want to be treated differently, then you need to change your behavior. You can't just talk about how you want things to change and hope that that compels people. You need to, through your actions and your words, communicate how you want to be treated, instead of assuming that other people are going to know without you communicating that. You know what I mean? So let me just read you this thread as some final food for thought. I just wanted to talk shit about this whole thing. So this guy's Twitter handle is @MattRuby. Dear ladies mad at West Elm Caleb, y'all turned dating into a video game and now you're mad that gamers are playing you. Let me explain. I understand why you're dissatisfied with online dating, but honestly, I don't get why women ever decided to go along with it in the first place. Swiping based on photos isn't progress, it's the patriarchy's wet dream. I'm old, so let me tell you how dating worked before smartphones. A guy had to be confident enough to approach a woman and talk to her in person, and then get her number, and then call her and talk to her again, and then ask her out. Crazy, right? All that pre-date conversation was great for screening. By the time you'd met up, you'd had some real intel on the person. It was inefficient, but also good for women because, gendered assumption ahead, women are good at conversations. I see those Sex and the City ladies eating brunch and gabbing. Straight dudes, we don't communicate like that. We just grunt and compare fantasy football lineups. So men that love online dating have turned this whole process into a video game. Tinder is just Angry Birds with people. Hinge is just Minecraft with the challenge of getting laid. And you know who loves video games? Dorky dudes. I remember when Grindr came out and thinking there's no way straight women will ever go along with this, yet here we are. Still kind of blows me away, actually. Online dating is women giving up their home field advantage. It's trading conversations for a world of emojis, cheat codes, hacks, swipes, copy-pastes, and what did he mean by that? Texts. Ladies, you made foreplay more quote-unquote efficient, and I hate to break it to you, but nothing could be more like a man than that. So when I hear stories about some dude who copy and pasted the same playlist to multiple women, all I can think is, of course he did. This is the game you set up for him and now he's playing it effectively. Gamer's got a game. The entire framework of online dating is based on accelerating the demise of chivalry. If it's working for you, then fine, keep it up. But if it's broken and causing you pain, shift gears. Get off your phone and make eye contact and talk to people in real life. They keep trying to sell us the metaverse because of some idyllic future when it's just more nightmare dystopian Black Mirror nonsense. Be a human being instead of an avatar. And while I'm on the subject, we also need to talk about red flag inflation. Not everything is a red flag. He didn't text you back in 3 hours? Red flag. Oh, calm down. Love is about compromise. Ask any married person how they make it work. The answer? White flags. You just constantly surrender and realize sustainable long-term commitment is not about getting what you want 50% of the time. The more someone talks about red flags, the more they sound like a goddamn egomaniac. If you fly off the handle about red flags, there's a good chance your addiction to ground rules and unwavering attachment to how things should be make you an undesirable potential partner. So, yeah, I think the way that it's framed in terms of saying that, oh, women set up this game because obviously men set up this game. Men invented dating apps, but it's the fact that women have willfully gone along with it. And I obviously recognize the way that we are encouraged and marketed to in a way that makes it seem like these are solutions. We live in a culture where convenience and expedience and instant gratification is considered the sign of innovation, or the solution to everything. Make everything quicker and faster, and therefore you can minimize issues. I think what we're starting to learn is that it can actually just create and compound a number of issues that go unaddressed for so long that it's too difficult to almost rewind or unpack. So I think the main takeaway is if it's not working, then shift gears, because dating apps work in the favor of a very small percentage of men who can cycle through lots of women successfully because they know how to play the game. There are a great majority of men who are just getting money sucked out of their wallets by these apps. I think there's a disproportionate number of men on dating apps. And then women who might get lots of matches but not necessarily connect with anybody. A while ago when I did a poll on Instagram about who was on dating apps and what they were on them for, majority of my audience is female, and a lot of people just saying they're just on them for attention. They just want to feel validation. They just enjoy getting matches with people and talking to people but never really meeting up with them. Obviously some people saying, oh, they are dating, oh, they did meet somebody, but a lot of people saying they're just on it for attention. And I think that it's, again, important to take time off. Learn to self-validate. It's the most important skill that I've learned, being able to feel good about yourself first, and then enjoying the attention from other people second. And once you've kind of created this sort of closed container for yourself, then you're going to be more discerning of the types of attention that you get. The older I get, the less I care about being considered attractive or validated for just superficial things, because that doesn't mean I'm connecting with the people who are just saying nice things about me. You know what I mean? And quality connection is so much more important than just quantities of attention to me personally. And I feel like that's generally just a healthier approach to take in life, and especially in dating. It doesn't mean anything to me to have a bunch of reply guys who just send love heart, I react to my stories, than it is to actually be asked out intentionally and have a real conversation with somebody who's putting in effort to get to know me and values the time that I've set aside to spend with them. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So I think that, let me see some of the replies on here. Yeah, I hate when people reveal their hearts like this. Mind your business. This is so projective. No way you just tried to mansplain dating. Not gonna lie, this is defending incel culture and super dangerous. This is the most accurate and succinct explanation of online dating. Women just don't like to admit they signed up to be played instead of being the players. Women are still very much the players, where women may have given you the time of day pre-apps just a circumstance. You are now competing with every hunk in a 50-mile radius. Good luck. Yeah, and I also just think it speaks to the superficiality of dating apps, because I think that to be able to image craft on a dating app is a skill in and of itself, to create an engaging dating app profile. And I don't think that it's necessarily an accurate reflection of somebody's character. I think there are plenty of people who are really interesting, personable people in person who just might not have the skills to create an engaging dating app profile. And that doesn't mean they're undeserving of love and connection. And they might not be that successful on dating apps. So maybe talking to people in person is going to be more beneficial to them. But when everybody is saying that dating apps are the solution, that can sort of hinder people's ability to consider options outside of dating apps. And obviously a lot of people are, but I just want to add to the group of people that are saying there are other options, and you can just be patient. You don't need to rush into anything, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be dealing with less things just because it happens faster. If anything, there are more things you have to deal with. And just for me, in my very passive approach to dating over the last few years, I appreciate, guys taking the time, mustering up the courage to ask me out. And then, different things happen and it doesn't really work out, which is fine. But I think that has been enough amount of attention for me, and like any more than what I've experienced would have been too much just for my specific circumstances. And it's just reminded me that it does take time to really get to know people, and not every connection or initial attraction has to go anywhere. You can just have little crushes, it's fine. And not everything, it doesn't have to go anywhere. It doesn't have to last forever either. And I think that this thread, even though some of it maybe isn't worded in a way that would be interpreted well by a lot of women, the point remains the same. It's like dating apps are set up, they're invented by straight dudes, and we live in a patriarchy. This kind of efficiency, instant gratification, solution approach is taken to so many things under capitalism. It's what everybody is investing in because fucking everyone, finance bros, tech bros, etc. So that's how men think like is a good way to connect with people. That doesn't mean that it is. And I think for women and men and anybody of any gender who genuinely want to take time to get to know people and be off dating apps and not be in situations where you're going to be played by so many people at once, it's a good option to get off dating apps. And I'm not saying that you're not going to come across someone who's like a West Elm Caleb in person, but I think the fact that someone's not on dating apps already means that their ability to play so many people at once is hindered, unless they're like literally a famous rich person. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. Also, how do people have time to be on dating apps like that? Like, is West Elm Caleb even really designing? Is he even really working at West Elm to begin with? I feel like the fact that he had time to date so many women at once suggests he's unemployed, if you ask me. But I digress. So yeah, those are just my thoughts. Not very cohesive, unfortunately, but I don't know. It's interesting to see the cultural response around something like West Elm Caleb. I didn't really want to get too much into the details of it because I think by the time this episode has aired, the whole kind of thing, the whole discourse around it will have died off anyway. So if you want to learn more, you can do a quick Google. There's so many articles about it. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. And thanks for listening. Stay hydrated. Stay safe out there. Tell your friends and family that you love them. And yeah, go be a better person. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.